Yitzchak and Rivkah. Today, I want to delve into 3 more chapters in Bereshit, Genesis. We will start by considering chapter 24, where Avraham sends out his servant to select a wife for his son Yitzchak from among the family of origin in Haran. Then we will consider parts of chapter 25, verses 19 through 34, which cover the birth and the early years of development of the twins Esav and Ya'akov. Finally, in chapter 26, we will see how Yitzchak, like his father before him, had trouble with Abimelech, the king of Gerar. Chapter 24 begins with Avraham expressing determination that Yitzchak, his son, of his old age, will not marry the local Canaanite girls. So he summons his loyal servant Eli'ezer and swears an oath with him in a strange ancient Near Eastern custom of getting Eli'ezer to place his hand under the thigh of Avraham. The oath Avraham swore in the name of El Shaddai, the God of heaven and earth, is stated in verses 3 and 4. I will not choose a wife for my son from among the women of the Canaanite, among whom I am living, but you will go to my homeland, to my kinsmen, and choose a wife for my son Yitzchak. Avraham then insisted that under no condition was Yitzchak to ever personally go home to his forefathers. And it says in verse 7, El Shaddai, God of heaven, who took me away from the father's house and away from the land in which I was born, who spoke with me and swore to me, I will give you this land to your descendants. I will send an angel ahead of you, and you will bring a wife for my son from there. Then in verse 10, the servant took the 10 of the master's camels and all the gifts from his master, and got up and went to Nahor's city. Upon arrival, he encountered Rebekah, drawing water from the town well. So that he could know that he had found the right girl, Eli'ezer called upon El Shaddai, saying in verses 12 through 14, El Shaddai, God of my master Avraham, please let me succeed today, and show your grace to my master Avraham. Here I am standing by the spring, and as the daughters of the town folk come to draw water, I will say to one of the girls, please lower your jug so that I can drink. If she answers, yes, drink, I will water the camels as well. Then let her be the one you intend for your servant Yitzchak. This is how I will know that you have shown grace to my master. Rivkah met all the requirements, and she proved herself to be the right girl. Eli'ezer inquired about her parentage and found that she was the daughter of Bethuel, who was the son of Abraham's brother Nahor, who had remained in Haran when Avraham was called to go to Eretz Israel. Having given Eli'ezer water to drink and having watered his camels, he gave her gifts provided by his master. Next he inquired about staying the night with the family. As she was directly related to Avraham, Eli'ezer said in verses 27 through 28, Blessed be El Shaddai, God of my master Avraham, who has not abandoned his faithful love for his master, because El Shaddai has guided me to the house of my master's kinsman. So the girl ran off and told her mother's household what had happened. When they arrived at the family home, Lavan, the brother of Rivkah, upon seeing the girl and seeing the gifts that Eli'ezer had bestowed upon his sister, he invited Eli'ezer into the house and prepared a formal welcome for his new guest. Before the evening meal was even served, Eli'ezer explained the reason for his presence and gave the family an update on all that had transpired since Abraham had been called to leave the family by El Shaddai. Finally, Lavan and Bethuel said, "Since this comes from El Shaddai, we can't say anything to you, either bad or good. Rivkah is here in front of you. Take her and go. Let her be your master's son's wife." And El Shaddai has said, when Abraham's servant heard what he said, he prostrated himself on the ground towards El Shaddai. After the meal, Eli'ezer brought out more gifts for the family. Then he and his entourage stayed the night. However, in the morning, Eli'ezer was keen to get going and to take Rivkah back to his master Avraham, saying, "Send me off to my master." But the family responded by saying in verse 57, "We will call the girl and see what she says." Now that was unusual, a very unusual practice in ancient Near Eastern culture, because once a girl's father had decided on the bridegroom, the deal was not a matter for the girl to decide. But the family called Rivkah and asked if she would agree to go with Eli'ezer. In verse 58, they asked her, "Will you go with this man?" And she said, "I will." So the family sent her away with their blessing, saying, "Our sister, may you be the mother of millions. May your descendants possess the cities of those who hate them." That last comment, "may your descendants possess the cities of those who hate them," is still being worked out in this 21st century. It is the territory of the so-called West Bank and Gaza that is presently occupied by the so-called Palestinians, who have no legal or scriptural right to occupy that land that was being spoken about in the blessing over Rivkah. So Eli'ezer and his entourage departed, at which stage the narrative leaps forward to the point where they are arriving back in Hevron, when Avraham and Sarah had lived earlier. But by the time Rivkah arrived, Sarah had been dead for over 3 years, and Avraham was now living with Keturah in Beersheba. Then, in 24, verse 62, we find that Eli'ezer and Rivkah were approaching Hevron. Yitzchak was actually heading along the road from his home in the Negev. He went out walking in the field, and as he looked up, he saw the camels approaching. It appears that Yitzchak had returned home to Hevron to mourn his mother Sarah, because when he saw the camels approaching, he was close to the tent his mother had lived in the latter years of her life. He did not reside in that tent, as some commentators have recently suggested. Chapter 24 concludes with the meeting of Yitzchak and Rivkah, Eli'ezer telling Yitzchak all about what had happened and how he became charged with finding a wife for Yitzchak. Now, whether or not Yitzchak knew that the marriage arrangement was going to occur is not stated. But it was the word of God, that is Yeshua, who ensured Yitzchak was in the right place at the right time. By that time, Yitzchak, of course, was 40 years old. And as verse 67 says, Yitzchak brought her into his mother Sarah's tent, and he took Rivkah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. Now that brings us to the end of chapter 24, and the end of the search for a wife. Next, I want to look at chapter 25, verses 19 through 34, which deal with the birth and early development of the twins, Esav and Ya'akov. But in saying that, we must bear in mind that there had been a gap of 20 years between the time when Yitzchak and Rivkah first met and when the twins were born. So beginning in verses 21 to 23, Yitzchak prayed to El Shaddai on behalf of his wife because she was childless. El Shaddai heeded his prayer, and Rivkah became pregnant. The children fought with each other inside her, so much that she said, "If it's going to be like this, why go on living?" So she went and inquired of El Shaddai, who answered her, "These are two nations in your womb. From birth they will be two rival peoples. One of these peoples will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger." The personalities of the two twins was diametrically opposite from the moment that they were conceived, and they never worked together as siblings, either in childhood or in adulthood. There was constant hatred between them, which was reinforced by what happened during their youth. As we read in Romans chapter 9, Shaul also gives a detailed account of the struggles Israel constantly faced as a result of their twin brother Esav and his descendants, who have kept the pressure on Yaakov, that is Israel, even in Shaul's time and even right down now to the 21st century. The influence of Esav was expressed through Edom, having always had an impact on the people of Israel. That was particularly evident during the earthly ministry of Yeshua, who was constantly hounded and challenged by the Judean authorities, who at that stage were the ruling remnant of Herod the Great and Archelaus his son. The same Judean authorities were the ones who had finally arrested Yeshua and put him on trial before Pilate. Returning to Bereshit chapter 25, the narrative suggests in verses 27 to 28 that the boys grew and Esav became a skillful hunter, an outdoorsman, while Yaakov was a quiet man who stayed in the tents. Yitzchak favoured Esav because he had a taste for game. Rivkah favoured Yaakov. Hence, sometime later, possibly when they were teenagers, Yaakov, being domesticated, cooked up some stew, while Esav scoffingly demanded, as he returned from a hunting escapade, that he wanted to eat some of this stew. Yaakov seized the opportunity to take the right of firstborn from his twin brother, demanding in verses 33-34, "First swear to me." Esav swore to him, thus selling his birthright to Yaakov. Then Yaakov gave him bread and lentils, and he ate and drank and went on his way. Thus Esav showed a great deal of contempt for the value of his birthright. If we jump forward to Bereshit chapter 36, we find how El Shaddai dealt with Esav when he became an adult. Esav, who became known as Edom, chose 3 Canaanite women to be his wives. He had 6 sons born to him while he was still living in the land of Canaan. Then he took his family and his possessions and headed away from the territory that had been promised to Avraham and Yitzchak, and settled away from his brother Yaakov in the hill country of Seir. Esav and his descendants, who went by the name of Edom, remained a constant threat to Israel throughout history. They became a burden to Yahweh, and such a burden that he finally said about Edom in Malachi Chapter 1, that he, Yahweh, will finally bring an end to Edom as a people group because of their attitude towards Israel down through history. Yahweh clearly expresses his constant disdain for Esav, Edom, by saying how he will deal with the descendants of Yaakov and Esav. "I loved Yaakov, but I hated Esav. I made his mountains desolate and gave his territory to the desert jackals." Edom says, "We have been beaten down now, but we will come back and rebuild the ruins." Yahweh Zebaot answers, "They can build, but I will demolish. They will be called the land of wickedness, the people with whom Yahweh is permanently angry." What we are actually witnessing at this present time is a preparation for the action of Yeshua and what he will do towards Edom in the Olam Haba, the age to come. We have not been told the actual timing when Edom will be finally and totally destroyed, but we can rest assured that the word of Yahweh, who is Yeshua, will finally fulfill his words at the right time. As we also read in Obadiah, Yahweh makes it abundantly clear that the whole of Edom will be destroyed, and all their territory around Mount Seir will be added to Eretz Israel as an eternal possession for restored Israel. Further, when we reflect on how Yeshua will deal with Edom, we need to reflect on the fact that now in 2025, between 60 and 70% of the population of the modern kingdom of Jordan are Palestinians who are directly descended from Edom, that is Esav. So it is a total reality that the Palestinians have no intention of developing a two-state solution to peacefully coexist with Israel. It must be realized that the modern Israel is currently facing a very long game. That dates all the way back to the birth of the twins, Esav and Ya'akov. So we can see only after the return of Yeshua will he bring an end to this present Middle Eastern crisis. Turning now to Bereshit chapter 26, we see how Yitzchak, like his father Avraham before him, had trouble with Abimelech, the king of Gerar. Yitzchak was forced to move westward because of a second famine. Now the first famine had caused his father Avraham to go down to Egypt. But we're told in verse 2 that El Shaddai said, "Don't go down to Egypt, but live where I tell you." In response, Yitzchak went and dwelt in Gerar, where his father had lived many years, and made a covenant with Abimelech over the well ownership. History was about to be repeated. When El Shaddai told Yitzchak not to go down to Egypt, he did not say that he should not settle in the territory covenanted by his father to Abimelech. Instead, Yeshua appeared as El Shaddai and said to Yitzchak in verses 3 through 5, "Stay in the land, and I will be with you, and I will bless you, because I will give you all the lands that you and your descendants are now in. I will fulfill the oath I swore to Avraham your father. I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars of the sky. I will give these lands to your descendants, and by your descendants all the nations of the earth will be blessed." All this is because Abraham heeded what I said and did what I told him to do. That was the Akedah, the offering of Yitzchak. He followed my regulations and my teachings. Those words were spoken by Yeshua, the Word of God, expressed as at that time, of course, El Shaddai. He was the one who reconfirmed the promise that he had earlier made with Avraham. El Shaddai sealed the covenant with Avraham through circumcision. Even though Avraham had made his own covenant with Abimelech over the Gaza Strip, El Shaddai still held fast to his commitment that he had made earlier. In verses 6 through 11, we see history repeats itself with Yitzchak passing Rivkah off as his sister in the presence of Abimelech. Hence the same situation emerged. But this time, Abimelech saw Yitzchak caressing Rivkah, his wife. Once that matter was out in the open, Abimelech realized that El Shaddai was actually with Yitzchak and Rivkah, and warned his people to leave Yitzchak and his family to reside peacefully in Gerar. The reward was expressed in verses 12 through 14, where Yitzchak planted crops in the land and that year reaped 100 times what he had sown. El Shaddai had blessed him. He became rich and prospered more and more, until he became very wealthy indeed. He had flocks and cattle and large household, and the Philistine envied him. But the saga did not end there. Abimelech's men kept stopping up the wells that Abraham's servants had dug. Yitzchak kept moving around the general area trying to avoid a confrontation. But still, his servants and those of Abimelech continued quarreling. Each man's herdsman claimed rights to the water. It matches the same pattern in many parts of the modern world where water is in short supply. Finally, Yitzchak moved yet again to Beersheba, where, in verses 24 and 25, El Shaddai appears to him yet again and said, I am the God of Abraham, your father. Don't be afraid, because I am with you. I will bless you and increase your descendants for the sake of my servant Abraham. So there Yitzchak built an altar and called on the name of El Shaddai. He pitched his tent there, and Yitzchak's servants dug yet another well. Doubtless his prosperity became apparent to Abimelech, who once again approached Yitzchak with the proposition that they make a treaty or an oath, that neither would harm the other. Even though Yitzchak had done nothing to offend Abimelech, the latter still wanted to broker a peace treaty between them. How familiar does all that sound? Particularly when we compare it with the alliances and treaties that are being broken, either directly with Israel or between the Arab groups and others in the wider Middle Eastern arena. The Abraham Accord agreement is a classic example of a man-made covenant for peace with Israel. It is the same rhetoric that has been heard over and over again, particularly since the Oslo Accord and onwards. But as all parties know, there is no real desire for lasting peace and security with Israel. All the parties are fully aware that the ultimate aim of every man-made treaty or covenant has an ultimate agenda that will lead to Israel's ultimate demise. But what they all fail to realize is that they're trying to undermine the unseen work of Yeshua that will, in time, lead them to their own destruction. The ultimate international goal is just the same as Abimelech wanted when he brokered an oath with Yitzchak and Abraham before him. But desperate to find lasting peace, Yitzchak, it says, Yitzchak prepared a banquet for them, and they ate and drank. Then next morning they got up early, swore an oath to each other. Then Yitzchak went away, and they left him in peace. That very day, Yitzchak's servants dug yet another well and found water. That is why Beersheba is called by that name, and it has remained so till this day. It is now the thriving capital of the Negev region and remains under the control of Israel. And that brings us to the end of today's sojourn with the patriarchal family. Next Shabbat, God willing, we will consider the rest of that parashah Toldot, which in chapter 27 we will find Yitzchak in his advanced years giving his blessing to his second son, Yaakov. Then realizing that he'd been tricked into blessing the wrong son from his perspective, he then sent Yaakov on his journey back to the home of their family of origin in Haran. So until next week, be sure to read the next parashah, which is number 7, Vayitzi, he went out, in which we will consider Yaakov and his 20 years in Haran. Shabbat Shalom.